Welcome to the Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin podcast. We present cold case crimes that we feel can and should be solved with your help. We provide the facts of the case and the research that we have done. Then web sleuths like you help us solve the mystery and provide the victim, family, community, and law enforcement with justice and peace of mind. This is Solve Crimes. Hey, Gavin.
Hey, Rick.
How are you?
I'm well. I have to tell you, though, I'm having a hard time sleeping right now. I'm having a hard time getting to sleep. Because
this case gets to you.
And it's taking up all of my spare thinking time. I'm not doing anything else. This is
Right.
what I'm focused on.
We discussed that when we started on this case, that, you know, especially you have some connections with, you know, she was around the age of your mom and kind of looks like her and those kind of things. I mean, it's and you tend to personalize things like this when you get so deep into it.
Well, you know, what kind of did it for me was we found news clippings with her photo.
Right.
And we couldn't find any good photography of Judith Hakari. And so I went to work trying to do the best that I could to make the engagement photo of hers that we got out of the newspaper a good photo that we could use, because
which is the thumbnail photo that we use on our YouTube
channel. Yeah, and I wanted because I want people to relate with this young, beautiful woman with a bright future ahead, and it's really hard to do that when it's just a half-tone scan.
Which is so that we can put some context to this. The episode we are going to be uploading, it'll be uploaded by the time we release this podcast. The second episode in our series on Judy Hakari is on the 7 weeks between when she disappeared and when they found her.
Right.
So which goes right to everything you're saying, as far as who she was and what she was doing and where she was at in life, and all of that factored into the police taking it seriously. That and the evidence, of course.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, as I was working on that photo and I read 130 articles.
Yeah. Like in one sitting, right?
I did. Yeah. It took me several hours, but I just couldn't get enough. I was texting you the whole time. Right?
Like, you were.
All those things that I was discovering, and
I knew what you were doing too. You were deep in that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's easy to do, and especially finding all this info that you did and the resources you used to find. I mean, we even have her yearbook photos from high school.
Dude, that was an experience that I just it really hurt to go and look at her yearbook, because there's a freshman in high school. She doesn't know it, but in 8 years she'll be dead. Right. It's really sad, and it got me to kind of thinking and sympathizing with her dad. His name's Wilho. Everybody called him Bill Hakari.
Yeah. This might be a great spot to, with some levity, but it's appropriate. You have an account with a certain website where you can search through genealogy.
Well, yeah, that's one of my hobbies is family history. I love genealogy.
Yeah. So I got a text from you late one night saying that I was going to you were telling me that I was going to either think you were completely nuts or that you were the best web sleuth that ever lived. I'm pretty sure I'm quoting you.
That's probably
correctly
exactly
on that.
what I texted, yeah.
Okay, and so what was it that you sprung on me that night?
That I'm related to Judy Hakari.
That had to be a shock.
Yeah. And I had told you several times how much she reminded me of my mom.
Right.
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 My mom.
It went pretty far back, but I mean, you weren't like
Oh yeah,
cousins, but
my mom and Judy Hakari are 12th cousins. So it's not. So I'm her 12th cousin once removed. Is how that works. So yeah, it's far back, but it became even more.
People don't say that much anymore. People used to say that once removed thing.
Well, people who love genealogy say it all the time.
Yeah, still say it, right?
Yeah.
Now people just give it a shortcut. Yeah, we're related.
No, but
that was pretty. That even made this even more personal for you, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, and the physical traits that were passed down from our common grandparents, for me 13 generations ago, for her 12, are strong because my mom. I'm telling you, my mom looks exactly like her, and other than being a little bit younger. My mom's 2 years younger than Judy Hakari. Her hairstyle was slightly different.
Have you talked to your parents about if they remember this case when it was happening? Or were they here?
They were not in Sacramento at the time.
Okay.
So I did call them and I did ask them about it. It was right in between. They had left. My dad was in the service. They had left, and then they came back about 4 years later. So they missed the whole thing.
The ultimate thing that we're saying here is that all of those reasons, this became personal, or at the very least, you're connected to this. And for me, not only did all this happen literally within 2 miles of where I live, it's also the fact that it's this young woman, the heartbreak and the sadness of the story of that never got to be finished, right?
Yeah.
Never got to progress past 23, and but also the fact that you and I have daughters, and it's a nightmare that every parent has, that something's going to happen to their daughter, and it's so I just on many levels, we want to see this case solved.
Man, we sure do. Now, Judy Hakari's parents and her fiancé and all of her friends, they had a 7-week wait between the time she disappeared to the time that they knew what happened.
Her dad called it hellish.
Hellish, yeah. There's
that's probably the understatement of this whole case.
There's an article in the Sacramento Bee by, I think his name is Art McGinn. Let me look. Yeah, his name is Art McGinn.
And who was he?
He was just a reporter at the Sacramento Bee, for what I can tell, and he went to the Hakari home, and he wrote a story that was, I don't know, it wasn't long, 200 or 300 words, but in it he described what he was seeing more than what he was being told, right?
Which is good reporting.
Yeah, Bill Hakari, I mean, I guess I'm not much of a sleuth to figure this out, but he had a thick Finnish accent. So I believe he was from Finland. He immigrated from Finland after the time which he learned to speak, right? So
got it.
He had a thick Finnish accent. He was not a terribly large man as far as height. He was a round man, right? He was described as a stocky man. And in the article that Art McGinn wrote, he talked about Bill Hakari being sitting on the edge of his seat, just looking down. And every once in a while, he would look up when he was hoping for something. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe hippies took her. Maybe she's in a hippie commune. And then he'd look down. No.
I remember you finding that article. That was
maybe she's a slave.
Strange.
Maybe she's a slave. That would be so much better than what in my heart I know, which is
human trafficking back then. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, that would be any parent's reaction to want it to be anything but, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially that because there was evidence that there was an abduction. I mean, the car door open, keys on the floor, buttons from her coat ripped off, strips of cloth, which we talk about in episode 2 on our YouTube channel, about how most likely that was for binding, and most likely it was not done at the scene, which means this was pre-planned.
I believe
the abduction was pre-planned.
Now, Ray Willis, he hoped that it was just somebody kind of a crime of passion. This is in another news article, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Rick, but as we develop our website, we're going to post all of these articles so people can read them, right?
Correct.
But
Yes, we are.
Ray Willis, he hoped that she was taken like spur of the moment, like it was a crime of passion.
Yeah, because earlier that day, the two of them, Ray and Judy, had been, they spent the morning refurbishing Judy's family heirloom piano that was 50-something years old. So they spent the day doing that because that was, again, Judy was a planner. Her goal was to have this piano be a centerpiece in their family home after their wedding. And then after that, in the afternoon, they had done a photo shoot, engagement photos.
Yeah, she had gone to go have her engagement photo taken. So she was dolled up, man. She was beautiful. She was looking great.
Well, and back then, now that I think about it, back then you did do portraits like that individually, and then it went in the paper with two portraits. That was the common thing to do. So-and-so and so-and-so are engaged, talk about their family. That was a very common thing back then.
Yeah, in fact, one of the really sad things about all this is that some of those articles on the disappearance and death of Judy Hakari are on the very page where other brides their engagement is being announced.
Well, and it's also, there's so many heartbreaking aspects to this, but the photo, her engagement photo that is used in our thumbnail on our YouTube channel, that you so, greatly colorized.
Yeah, I don't know if I expertly did it, but I put a lot of care into it.
It shows. It shows. It very well done. But the hard part for me looking at it is that was the very last photo taken of her on the day she likely died.
Yeah.
And that's very hard.
There are a couple of versions of it. It's obvious that the family had the photos from the photographer and that they provide them to news stories because there are at least two, maybe three. I think there are three photos that are used in newsprint where she is in that outfit. Her hair is done that same way. It's that same photo shoot. Right. I'm sure they treasured those photos for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And heartbreak when you look at them. But I think during that 7 weeks, I think all things considered, the family did a good job, and the community too, with keeping the story alive. It wasn't something that people took lightly, like we've discussed right from the beginning, and the community was right there with everybody. I mean, it was it was quite literally a drama unfolding each day, and even as the search for her by authorities started to wane in the weeks, after the abduction, because what else could police do? There's not much more you can do, and so it started to wane. But the family refused to let it die, and they gave interviews. And I mean, that must have been rough to give interviews about that. But they knew, and I think it was pretty smart on their part. They kept it alive, and I think the community wanted to keep it alive too. It was still of interest. Yeah, Sacramento in the 1970s was slightly different than it is now. Sacramento,
Cowtown.
Yeah, Sacramento has sprawled quite a bit, but back then it was a little bit more compartmentalized as far as the suburbs around town and the towns in the unincorporated county that kind of surrounded Sacramento. So there were countless newspapers in Roseville and Citrus Heights and Carmichael and Elk Grove. They were everywhere, and all of them did at least weekly updates, and the Sacramento Bee for a while did a daily thing. And the story went as far as the San Francisco Chronicle, the LA Times, the Fresno Bee.
Right.
It was
now.
What
was the timing on that? Did it? I think it went to those the outskirts papers after the body was found, I think, right? I don't think they would cover a missing person story unless it was really.
It didn't make it to LA until she was found, but it did sporadically make it to the Central Valley and the Bay Area at her disappearance, mostly when her parents started to offer a reward. So her parents offered a $1,000 reward, which is about, I think that's about $7 or $8 grand today. Something like that, probably. You know, so that actually goes to talk about this family, right? Their daughter was I don't want to say prized possession, but she was their hope, right? Just like all children are to their parents. And what they were able to get together was $1,000. It's not a drop in the bucket, but it also wasn't like they were the Hearst family or anything like that. This was a middle income family who just desperately wanted their daughter back, and they were able to get together $1,000 reward. That's when it started to kind of show up down in the Chronicle and places like that.
Right. And, again, going to the parents, especially Bill Hakari, doing interviews to keep this whole thing alive and keep people talking about it, because that's the same reason why we're doing what we're doing, is to keep it alive and get people to focus on it and talk about it again. And so some of the interviews he did were, he was commiserating and talking about Judy and talking about how she was excited about her wedding and that sort of thing. And he made mention, which I found, cute, was that Judy wanted a big church wedding, which was very common back then. And he offered her an alternative.
That's an alternative that I have offered our children. Please, for the love of all that is holy, do not do a giant wedding.
Don't do a giant wedding, right? And so, he had offered her, he said, instead of doing the big wedding, why don't you guys just go straight to a honeymoon in Hawaii and I'll pay for it?
Yeah, I'll pick up the bill.
But I'm sure back then, that was in the day of Hope chests and,
Well, Pan Am, it was not cheap to go to Hawaii in 1970.
Right, exactly, yeah. So that, but I mean, in regards to her not accepting that was because that was in the day of hope chests and little girls dreaming of their white dress and walking down the aisle and all that kind of stuff. There was no way she was going to take that offer.
Yeah, I don't think it was terribly common to have somebody just go to a justice of the peace and get married and call it a day, especially for a first marriage. Right? That probably wouldn't have happened back then. Yeah. I'd like to get your opinion on something though, Rick. One of the things that has been, was striking to me as I've read and reread and kind of dug into the story is that Ray Willis, who is her fiancé, was really only quoted a couple of times. Quoted briefly in one story, and then there was a longer story that he was kind of he was quoted a lot in. Evelyn, who was Judy's mom, I don't think was ever quoted during the ordeal, but she did write a letter to the editor of the Sacramento Bee afterwards and thanked the community. Right. Everything else was Bill Hakari.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
I've thought about that, and obviously we're 50 years out, so it's hard to corroborate or ask questions to discover this stuff. Not that it's super relevant, but just from our own curiosity place. I wonder if I think if I can put myself in Ray's shoes, it must have been a very, very. I mean, of course, it's hard for Bill and Evelyn being parents, but for him, he was nobody really talks about the fact that this was his future too. Yeah. This was the woman he was going to spend the rest of his life with and have children with, and it was just about to happen. I mean, it was right there. So,
and you know what? If I can sidebar you for a second, Judy Hakari, by all accounts, would not just fall in love with some schlub, man. She was planning, right? He must have been a terrific guy.
Right. And I picture him being very depressed during this time. and not wanting to talk to the press. I mean, who knows? Who knows really? I mean, he may have been a very shy man. He may have been not wanting to. I mean, we didn't see a lot of this in the newspapers, but there might have been people in the community that considered him a suspect. I mean, it's natural. That could be another reason why he didn't speak out much. I think, if he could have spoken to help further the case, he may have. But all the quotes that we do have from him, I mean, he was, it sounds like he was very much in love with Judy, and this was devastating to him.
Yeah, I'd wondered about Evelyn. She died pretty young. She died in 1986, and she wasn't quoted very often. Maybe she reminds me a little bit of my mom, somebody who doesn't speak loudly, but her actions speak loudly, because she established a perpetual education fund in Judy's name at Sac State.
Right. That's right.
So she was a talker.
Yeah.
But I also kind of thought, at first I thought, it's the 1970s. The man of the house is going to be out there in front. It's very patriarchal and everything.
Yeah.
But I also feel like Bill Hakari was kind of a protector. Like, maybe Evelyn's just really broken up about this, and
she might have been very emotional.
Be. So I'll take the brunt of it.
And he was I will say that he was very quotable. I mean, the quotes that he gave were very heartfelt and really hit you where it hurts, which I think is part of the reason why it stayed in the press during those 7 weeks.
And he spoke on behalf of both of them. He was always very respectful. My wife and I know that.
Yes.
My wife and I would never think that.
By all accounts, he seemed like a very, typical, and I don't mean that in a detrimental way. I mean a very, immigrants family was everything. I think we've lost that in a lot of ways in where we are now. But back then, family was everything. And as you said, they were so proud of her and her accomplishments and where she was going. And so I think he was very traditional in that sense, the protector and spokesperson.
You think about those things. I've never lived I have lived abroad. I have lived outside of the United States, but not as a family, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, Kimberly and I did move our family cross country, and when that happened, man, we zipped up tight together because we were who we had. Right. And maybe that's something about Bill Hakari, is that he had left his homeland and he had started a family and he was going to protect it. And which makes it all the more tragic that his daughter is a victim of such terrible crime.
Because now that I think about it, he was absolutely acting as a spokesperson for the family. I haven't seen any quotes from his other children. Have you?
I haven't. The only reason that I know who they are is because of Evelyn's obituary. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So this 7 week period that we're focused on for this episode of our podcast and our YouTube channel, I wanted to present that before we got into all the the death stuff, just to kind of give people a sense of Judy and her relationship with Ray and and her parents, how hard this hit them, and the quotes that Bill gave. I thought it was important to kind of, just present and put people in the shoes of the community and of law enforcement and of her family during this time period before we get into the the heavier stuff. Yeah, next episode we're going to get into some real heavy stuff.
Right.
It will not be an episode that you want your little kids to listen to. And
I mean, we've kind of agreed that we don't need to be
salacious, gory
in the description. We're going to be we're still going to be respectful to Judy's memory and her family, but we'll talk about things that are relevant, to finding her. There are such things as MO, to discuss as far as the what was done to her and that kind of thing. I mean, those kind of things do play a part in murder investigation, unfortunately.
Yeah, so we'll get into those things. There were some pretty important clues that, for people who are following this journey that we're on, Rick, that are trying with us to solve the puzzle. There are a couple of pieces of the puzzle that are really important that happened in this 7 weeks, and I just want to reiterate them. I think we've talked about it, but for those of you that are keeping score, right?
Yes. And if you're not, we'll get you to our website where we'll put pieces there and timelines where you can get up to speed.
Yes. Okay. Judith Hakari, when she went missing, was wearing her nurse's uniform from Sutter Memorial. On that nurse's uniform, there was a pin that had her name. It was springtime, which is a little bit chilly in Sacramento. She had a coat. It was a white coat with polka dots and buttons. It was a button-up coat. Right?
Yep.
She was wearing white saddle shoes. I need to ask my wife or my daughters what a saddle shoe is, but I just kind of think it's like
I have a picture of it, but yeah,
a comfortable shoe that you would be able to do nursing work in, right? It's part of her uniform.
Yeah.
She was wearing a silver watch that was described as a duty watch, not a duty watch, Tracewell. A duty watch.
I know. Yes, he's doing this for my benefit.
Yeah, I don't know what a duty watch is.
I can come up with a description if you'd like.
I don't know that your description will be accurate to what Judy Hakari was wearing, but it was a silver watch.
Okay.
Those hopefully listeners will help us on that. What a duty watch is. In my mind, I'm just thinking.
Quit saying it.
Well, it's what it's described as, right? So I think that it must be a watch that all of the nurses wore. It was part of their uniform. She was wearing stockings, and I guess that's...
Well, it's very typical back in that day nurse's uniform.
Yeah. I mean, it full on looks like something out of a movie, right? In the 1970s, that it was a very...
Well, we were just mentioning, like flight attendants on Pan Am. I mean, it was the same thing. It was very
gender specific. It was made to accentuate beauty in order for there to be a better bedside manner. Probably, I don't know what it was, but it was the time, right? It was the time.
Right.
Okay. The other thing that is important, I think, is in the car there are remnants of towels, like the towels had been ripped, and there were ravels of towels, right, in the car, and
right.
And
what was the description? I seem to remember you telling me or reading about the types of towels they were.
So it was described as a cannon ribbed towel, which the cannon is the type of fabric that towel fabric is. I mean, all of our towels are pretty much cannon towels, unless you're like some highfalutin somebody like buying crazy awesome towels. I don't know, but it's towel material, right? And then it's ribbed, which meant that it was like striped. It was like it was cut so that it was shorter in some places and longer in others.
Now, did they describe whether it was ripped or cut?
So I didn't read anything that said whether it was ripped or cut. But it had unraveled. There were ravels of towel in the car.
Okay.
And the thing that I think is most important about that is I think it goes to pre-planning. Judy got her apartment on the first floor of her apartment complex at Markston Apartments. Now, Rick, you've been there, right? It's a 2-story apartment complex. And it's campus style, like everything is in California. There are buildings with, 10 apartments in them, and then another building with 10 apartments.
Yeah, there's little walkways and landscaping,
Ray asked her to get a 2nd-story apartment because he felt that would be safer.
Right.
But she was on the first floor because she wanted to restore that piano, and in order to have the piano in the apartment, she had to be on the first floor. Yep. That meant that there was no clear view into the parking lot from anywhere within the apartment because there was a brick wall, like a privacy wall. It's like the architects designed that way, right? On the second floor, you have privacy because you're on the second floor.
But I was just there, just a few days ago, and I also believe it was a sound wall because it's right off of Arden Way, which is a big thoroughfare.
It's a thoroughfare.
It's still a thoroughfare, right? So I believe that it was more of a sound wall than a
sound
barrier.
Wall. I see.
Yes, it was.
But either way, that made it so that if you were inside the apartment, you couldn't see to Judy's parking spot.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, which factors into
and I think that
Ray having to walk out there.
Yeah, and I think if somebody was planning on taking Judy, they were stalking her, knowing that nobody would see them because of that wall, because of where she parked. I think that goes to also pre-planning. So not only do we have ravels, and what are the ravels? What does that mean? The towel ravels. What would that?
It's to me. Being a true crime buff and reading a lot of these things, it's used for binding.
Tying up wrists.
For tying
ankles.
up wrists, and maybe even as a to silence someone.
Yeah, like a gag.
A gag, right. And it's that also goes toward pre-planning, and and again, 1970, there were no surveillance cameras, there were no so if anyone was planning this kind of a thing, and we'll get into the similarities with the other victims of that come after Judy, but to me it does appear that the whoever did this, and if he did the others as well, was the perpetrator was definitely someone who worked in the shadows. None of these things happened during the day. They were all very late at night. And being that I've been to both, two of the apartment complexes where there were victims, they're very similar. It was a style back then, the apartment buildings. The other one is also 2 stories. And the parking lots at night were dark. It's very easy to stand in the shadows or hide between cars. To me it seems, and I don't know what the lighting was like back then. I have no clue, but I'm sure it wasn't as bright. Now both those parking lots, by the way, have very well lit areas. So that's the thing for me, is that it looked like the guy operated in the shadows and waited for an opportunity.
There's one other thing, and before we wrap this up, there's one other thing that I think is really important. I read an article that was an interview with Ray Willis. And in that article, Ray specifically said that Judy had planned, if she ever was attacked, to just go along with it, because she had a psychology professor tell her that the woman's chances of survival increased if they didn't fight, which I think was a thing in 1970.
Right. And I'll tell you, I don't know how you handled it with your kids, but I told all my kids that you get in that car with someone and you're done.
Yeah.
And I've told them, I don't care, grab a bicycle, grab a newspaper dispenser, grab anything you can that won't fit in that car. Do not, because I told my kids that people that take children like that was what I told them, they're cowards. And they won't be doing it where they get caught or where they're seen. So if you scream your bloody murder and grab onto something big, light pole, whatever you have to do not get in that car. Even if they threaten to kill you right there, because they won't. The odds are better that they won't.
Well, and we always told our kids, we taught our kids to fight. We specifically took them to classes to learn to fight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we taught them to fight for each other and to fight for themselves. Right. So, I guess you could fart for yourself, but I don't know how well that would be.
You didn't give your kids duty watches either.
Yeah, I didn't give them duty watches, but yeah, you have to fight. It's better to go down fighting than it is to just go down.
Well, I told my kids, if you are going to die there.
Yeah.
Don't, do everything you can not to, obviously, but if you're going to die, I'd much rather have that happen right there and not where we don't know where you are and they take you somewhere and possibly torture for that you don't want that.
Yeah. Well, it's just a really sad thing.
It's unfortunate to have those conversations with your kids. It's pretty heavy, but it happens.
Yeah. I hope, I know back in the 70s that was a thing, because I know many of the women there was one woman who was a would-be victim of a serial killer in the Pacific Northwest who kind of blazed a trail that she survived because she fought and got away, and she started teaching the girls in that college town to fight. Prior to that,
I'd like to think
it wasn't a thing.
Right. Yeah. And I'd like to think that the buttons from her coat show that she did fight.
I hope it shows that.
Yeah, I think it does. It's one of those things you kind of hope that it means that.
I know I'm giving more false endings than like a Tchaikovsky ballet here, but okay, the last thing I want to bring up here.
It doesn't matter. Everybody's turned this off.
Yeah, a long time ago. No, in order to grab and bind somebody, assuming that they're fighting back, like I'm a big man. I'm 6'2". I'm a big man, right? And my wife is 5'7". I think that if she struggled, I couldn't do it without help. So,
well, but without giving too much away, she was. They did find contusions, so she could have been knocked out.
Could have been.
If she did fight, hard. And again, it looks like there was binding involved, and so. She could have very, very easily been knocked out because she was struggling, that kind of a thing. There's just so many question marks that it could, we're just guessing at virtually everything. No one will ever know that for sure.
Well, that's probably a good place to end. Next week we'll get into the discovery of her body.
Found.
Yeah.
We'll get into that. Okay. Well, that sounds pretty good. I think we're moving right along, and again, we keep saying this, but I want to reiterate one more time that anyone who's listening, please click subscribe and like and follow our podcast, follow our YouTube channel. The stuff that we present here is a little more freeform, and we kind of loosely. Follow the stuff that we put in our episodes. We try to match the topic at hand, but it is important if you really want to help us solve this case, and that really is what we want. We've mentioned before that we were in contact with the cold case unit, homicide unit at the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, and we would love to give them some info to follow up on some leads. We're very respectful of what they're trying to do, but we also know that they've got current homicides they're working on, and leads are pretty hard to come by when you have a 50-year-old case. So that is the reason why we're broadcasting this as far and wide as we can. If
you lived at the Markston Apartments where she was taken in 1970, we would love to hear from you.
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of understand.
We'd love to. Yeah.
But yeah, let's leave it there, should we?
Any connection that you have to this case, even if you just lived in Sacramento and remember it, we'd love to hear from you and pick your brain a little bit and see if we can use any of the information that you provide us. So please get in touch with us. It's not difficult to get in touch with us. So I think that's good for episode 2, Gavin.
All right. See you, Rick.
Okay. Thanks. See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin podcast. Please subscribe to stay up to date with the cases that we feature. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin, for more details and visuals that we can't provide here. If you have information on any of the cases we feature, please visit rgsolvecrimes.com.